Hi, and welcome to episode 6 of
Changing the narrative. Sorry, I forgot my cue.
You Are
I'm Elizabeth Rouse, and this is my co-host.
Murray Elborn.
Wow, we're gonna work on that, folks.
Murray Elborn.
We're getting better every day, every episode.
I think
Of
what we
growth.
should incorporate is an Australian word that we were just talking about off recording that we should introduce to the American public and the world. Actually, we're a worldwide podcast.
That would be a nice touch.
So today the word is nice, Nice, but in Australia we pronounce it noise.
Noise.
It's a little bit actually New Zealand noise because
Good on ya.
in Australia we say fish and chips, but in New Zealand they say fish and chops.
Okay, we're not gonna talk about food though, because I'm hungry. So we're gonna move on from that. So
Elizabeth,
noise.
what is our topic for episode 6?
We are going to touch on self-awareness and body language. So, shout out to anyone who's watching these episodes back to back. If you've noticed, we actually queued this up unscripted, but very intentionally from episode 5. So, we're going to explore some of the non-visual approaches to these topics, why it's important, how it's important, when and where we do it, all sorts of things. So, Murray, where should we start?
Well, I'm going to start with some pet peeves, Elizabeth.
Oh, geez.
I'm going to get up on my soapbox here for just a minute, and I'm going
Okay,
to
but
tell
when I
you
get tired of listening to you, I'm going to push you off.
that we are on a visual platform, okay, on a
Yep.
audio podcast on iTunes, but we're also on YouTube,
Hmm.
the Immerability YouTube channel. And so the first thing I teach students when I'm working with them is that people are watching you. And because
Hmm.
you can't see, it's not an excuse to not be aware of things like making eye contact,
Hmm.
not putting the top of your head in the screen camera view so people see the crown of your head. Um, just things like that. If you are low vision and you need to adjust something on your video feed, then you need to find or press a button that will disable your camera so that you can do whatever you need to do rather than to have people see a close up of the crown of your head. So these are all things that I think are very important when we talk about jobs, which is a
Hmm.
big topic right now, and we talk about interviews,
Hmm.
and we talk about blindisms, and we talk about all these things that are very important in that job setting and getting a job. If you walk into an interview and you do not make eye contact or do you not relate to the person who's interviewing you, it doesn't matter how intelligent you are, how qualified you are, it is very unlikely that you'll get that job because people like to be around people who connect with them. And
And let's be honest, right? If you walk in with a cane or a guide dog or you're, open about your blindness, you're probably already working at a deficit. So you don't want to give them an easy excuse to dismiss you from that process. You want to
yeah,
put your best foot forward, and that includes all of those things.
absolutely. And chances are you'll probably be working as part of a team. And
Hmm.
so that if you can't relate to people and you can't relate to being part of that team, that's a challenge as well. And that, I mean, that's why I love sport because it really gives you that, Elizabeth is enacting a similar thing, right? Is where you're getting together as a group, you're working together as a group, you're doing something in communication, teamwork, trust, you're building all of those skills that relate or should relate to you being more confident and more self aware about how you present yourself and your body language. It's really important. Okay, I'm hopping off my soapbox now. Back to you.
I didn't even have to push you off.
I
Good
know, right?
job.
Yeah,
Good job.
quick about things.
Okay. Do I have any pet peeves? I would definitely second, right? My mom always taught me like you have to know your audience, right?
Yeah.
And for a lot of us, it's when and how can I speak openly about something, whether it's somebody that has made you angry, whether it's a personal topic. It's, when you can't always see, you have to be self-aware enough to know who is around you or to assess whether or not like this is a safe and appropriate time to bring up a sensitive topic. Um, this is something that I see a lot of, people outside of the blindness community do too. So this is just a general Elizabeth pet peeve. Um, if you are on the Greyhound, for example, I don't need you to talk on your phone this loud to tell me about all the problems you're having in your latest relationship because I guarantee you, me and the lady behind me are we're contributing to your conversation, and you might not know it, but we are really in on that, right? You don't need me to know your business. Zip it and call your friend later. Okay. That's one. I think the other big piece of self-awareness to me, and we've talked a little bit about this on the podcast before, so I'm going to keep this short because I don't want to be redundant. Be aware of how you are putting your image out in the world. Okay. Again, blind people are always working at a deficit in that people expect less of us, i.e., if you have a stain on your shirt. Okay. I don't care if you just spilled coffee on yourself because somebody ran into you, like they spilled their coffee on you. Somebody's going to look at you and go, oh, that's so sweet. Murray doesn't know he has a stain on his shirt. I'm not going to tell him because I don't want to hurt his self-confidence. Okay. Murray, if I see a stain on your shirt, I'm telling you it's there because I don't want you to look like a moron.
I'm
Okay.
just looking down at my shirt, and I've only got a Gonzaga logo today. So
No stains, no
the
stains.
Bulldogs.
But like for real, right? I mean, the trend when I was in like middle school and high school was socks that don't match, right? Every
Now,
kid in the
now it's
world
the
was
cool thing to do, though.
every kid in the world was doing it. But I promise you, if I would have done it, somebody would have been like, oh my word, she doesn't know what socks she's wearing, right? People assume incompetence. So be, circling back to episode 5, be a confident version of you, but be an aware version of you, right? If it's not an appropriate time, for example, to wear mismatched socks, have a way to identify which ones are your dress socks and which ones aren't, a splatter paint pattern or what have you. If you want to be that person who wears splatter paint dress socks, more power to you. Just be aware of that, right? We want to be cognizant of the version of ourselves that we are putting out in the world, and there's a lot of pieces and parts to that are hard to navigate, and we have to learn embarrassing lessons in the not easiest light sometimes. That's okay. Live, learn, move on, do better, right?
Right.
That's my immediate pet peeves. I'm sure I'll think of more, but that's where I want to start.
So I want you to tell me about a time when you have not been on top of personal body language or being aware of your situation, and who told you about it and how did it make you feel?
Do you want a good example or a bad example?
Well, maybe you can give us both.
Ooh, saucy. Okay. I'm gonna flash back to my theater days in college because I think I learned a lot about self-awareness and like body language in the theatrical space. So I'll tell you one story from an actual production I was in, and I will tell you one story from a class that I was in, and I'll tell you a really embarrassing Elizabeth's level of self-awareness story, just because I know Murray will enjoy this.
Well,
Um, so when I was in the green room during one of the opening shows of my college, Central College's performance of Anonymous, I was having a conversation with the person next to me, and I don't have depth perception, so I don't have a ton of like body awareness as is, and like theater kids are also like very up in each other's business. Okay, maybe this was a dress rehearsal. Anyway, I went to like lean over to tell this dude something, and I went to pat his leg. Um, I missed his leg. So
ooh.
we're just going to leave it there. Ben has never let me live it down. And I was mortified because I was like, oh my, like, I am so, like, there was not consent involved in I am so sorry. Right. And I learned like there are places and times when you need to keep your hands to yourself. Right. It was a total accident. I would never do that to somebody unintentionally. He was like, other than teasing me about it, right? Like he was fine. We were good. We're still friends. Like it was fine. But I was just mortified because I was like, that is a personal boundary that I would never want somebody to cross with me. Right. I mean, we talk all the time in blindness communities about people not using their canes and like doing, we call them zombie hands, where they like explore like this. Okay. Think about what is chest height on women, and that's not an okay way to explore, right? Like I've learned in blindness communities to stand with my hands crossed over my chest because I don't want somebody touching me without my permission. Um, so that's my mortifying Elizabeth story. Sorry,
I
Ben.
like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, sorry, Ben. I would say a good one was when I was taking a acting 2 class, which is like classical acting, right? Think Shakespeare and Moliere and all the long-winded guys from the early times. Okay. I was doing a scene that required a lot of movement. And for me, that's a lot of like going into the space and exploring and working out blocking with my partners that we both feel comfortable with and blah, blah, blah. Right. So I'm doing this scene. I can't even remember who my partner was. It also might have been Ben, to be very honest. And our technical director just kind of walked in on one of our rehearsals and he was just kind of watching. And I mean, Ron knows me super well. I took a stagecraft class with Ron. Like we've talked about lighting design. He's forced me to do lighting design. Super great guy, like very high expectations for me as a blind student. Right. At the end of our scene, Ron goes, Elizabeth, you have incredible eye contact. And I thought he was being sarcastic. I literally laughed out loud. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I could not tell you what color this man's eyes are. Like, I don't know. And he goes, no, I'm serious. Like, you make incredible eye contact, and I don't know how you do. And I was like, bro, I'm looking at his forehead. Like, and if I can't see him, like if it's dark, I'm looking for where his voice is coming from. Because
Yeah.
even if you're looking at somebody's mouth, you're closer than looking at your feet or looking
Yeah.
at their chest or whatever,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So it was just this incredible compliment that I was not expecting, and that really bolstered my self-confidence and frankly my level of self-awareness. If I'm looking at somebody's forehead, that's going to be passable for me. So
Yeah.
that's something that I always pass on to other people is like, if you are not confident like making eye contact with someone, whether it's nystagmus or something else that's kind of getting in the way of your confidence, just aim for the forehead and you're probably close enough.
But
um,
the moral to that story is that you were trying to do that, right?
Absolutely. Well, and I don't even think I was, Marie. I think I
Right.
was just so used to doing it
Yeah. Yeah. It was second nature to you.
because I mean, I've gotten after my friends. I got after a guy that I dated for like sitting like this, right? He had his, and I would literally like, he asked me to do this. I'd put my hand under his chin and I'd tip his head back. And eventually he got to the point where he didn't need me to do it. And it wasn't even like, I mean, don't tell him I said this. Like he's a very social aware person. He's funny. He's charismatic. I don't even think he realized he was doing it. Right. So it
Right.
wasn't even like, oh, poor blind boy. It was like, bro, like, let's fix this. And at one point I did it and he was like, I'm looking at my phone. And I was like, oh, never mind. So we all have our moments, right? But it's knowing that you do something, having someone point that out to you, either a success or like an area of improvement,
Yeah.
and then being cognizant in changing that skill for the better. But
Yeah.
yeah, okay, give me an embarrassing Murray story, please.
Okay.
I know
So
you do nothing embarrassing ever, but like I want you to make one up.
no, but one day I turned up to goalball training, wearing a t-shirt back the front. Yeah, it was completely back the front, because I didn't see the tag on the back, which was
Yep.
a little bit embarrassing because I was wearing it in the shopping center before I went to goalball training.
Oh no.
So that wasn't real great. That was a complete blindy moment. And then I think uh, I think I spilt something one day. I was conducting an interview actually for a hire,
Mm.
and I spilt hot chocolate on my white shirt, and it was the morning, like literally 8:30 in the morning. And so I actually think I went and bought a sweater from a store to be able to put over my shirt so people couldn't see it. So
Hey, that's self-awareness.
yeah, that's right.
That's self-awareness.
You got
You
to
knew what people
correct.
would think and you corrected it.
You got to
You've put
correct.
in the time and the effort to be able to financially be able to do those things. You
Yeah,
pivoted. That's
yeah.
creative thinking.
You gotta pivot. It's one of those things.
You
It
also have to learn to laugh at yourself though, right?
Yeah,
Like we all do it. And
these
let's
things
be real,
happen.
guys, sighted people do it,
Yeah,
you
I
know?
mean, these things happen. Never take one of you if you're going on a date. Here's a tip: never take it to Italian. Never eat spaghetti with sauce.
Are you kidding me? That's going to be like the true testament of if a man is the one. Like if he can watch me eat spaghetti and not be like absolutely not. Like
You just like it's gonna
you joke,
follow.
but my dad has told me that for years.
Really, that's funny.
Spaghetti and tacos, man. I don't mess around.
Yeah,
Okay? I don't mess around.
tacos are a beast to
Oh,
themselves.
wait, no, we're not talking about food. We're not talking about
That's
food.
right. I had really good
Ugh,
tacos last night. Actually, it was really good.
stop it. You're a stinker.
I am. But I think like being self-aware is really important. Sometimes I'll do Zoom sessions with parents who ask me, "Or how do I get my kid to brush their hair?" And I say, "Well, I have none, so you're probably asking the wrong person." No, I don't actually. I just say, "Look, you can feel, right? Use your hands, feel, get somebody to tell you."
Hmm.
Have a style that you use and constantly use that style once you've
Yep.
learned how to do it. Repetition
Yep.
is everything, same thing. brushing your teeth, putting on
Yep.
makeup we
And
talked about in a previous episode.
one of the most important things that you just said, Murray, is ask someone,
Yeah,
right? If you're learning something for the first time, I still do this sometimes, like when I straighten my hair, right?
yeah,
I don't do it enough that I'm like, I 100% got everything straight. Okay.
yeah.
I will literally like if I'm not at home, I will FaceTime my mom and be like, dude, I'm gonna do a panorama view of my head. I need you to tell me what spot I missed or whatever that looks like, right? Because
Yeah,
until you have that rote like muscle memory built into
yeah,
you,
absolutely.
you just make sure it's somebody you trust, right?
Yeah,
Don't
absolutely.
ask somebody off the street like, hey, does my face look okay? Because they're
They
gonna
don't
think you're
think it's
crazy.
appropriate in the workplace.
And they also might lie.
Yeah,
And that's also not self-awareness,
right.
right? Know your audience, figure out who that person you can trust. Frankly, to tell you, like, Murray, there's a giant stain on your shirt. You can't wear that, right? Or Murray, you can't wear that belt with those shoes. Like, whatever it is,
Right.
you need that honest feedback. And if it is, Elizabeth, you look like you haven't brushed your hair in 3 days, go take a shower, right? I want to know. Case in point, I was getting ready to go, I was going on my Alaska cruise and I took a shower the morning that I left and I got in the car and I hate blow drying my hair. Okay. Like with a passion. I have a lot of hair. It takes a long time. Okay. I have enough hair for me and Murray and
Yeah.
it takes me forever and I get bored. So I'm like, I'm not going to dry my hair, right? It's not good for my hair. I'm just going to get in the car. My mom looks at me and she goes, did you shower today? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, okay, cool. Your hair's just wet, not greasy. Okay. And I was like, are you
Wow, your hair
kidding
must
me?
get really greasy sometimes if she thought if
I
you.
don't know. I was like, Monica, what? So now I'm like super conscientious, right? I would even say a little self-conscious about the fact that like when my hair is wet, it looks greasy, apparently. So
Is
like I've
is-
started
call your parent by their first name. That's disrespectful.
I've started like blow drying my hair, or I've started like putting my hair up so that it's not as obvious. But like those are good things for us to know.
Yeah.
I I go to work in a remote environment, so my hair has time to dry. If I'm ever going to a meeting early in the morning or going to, my in-person job, I know that I need to dry my hair. And that's not something that I would have paid attention to if somebody had never made that comment to me. She didn't make it to me to be a jerk, but
Yeah.
she made it to me nonetheless, right? And
Yeah.
I trust her opinion. So have those people in your life, welcome those people in your life, share with them how you want to receive that feedback. Cause like in the middle of the day when I could do nothing about it, I don't want someone to walk up to me and be like, dude, do you have a giant zit like right here on your face, right? Like, I don't want to know that. I don't want to know that because then I'm going to be like, oh my God, it's all over my face. It's all anyone can see. Okay. When is that feedback acceptable and how would you like to receive those feedback are two really important, like meaningful conversations that you can have with other people.
And along those lines, I think also really important, like we just talked about, practice, right? If you're going to have an electronic Zoom interview for a job or you're meeting with somebody, you need to practice that your setup is right before you
Yes.
get to that meeting. There's so many times where I see students meeting with somebody where they're on their cell phone and it's like going up and down and they're walking around the house. And it's not just people with blindness either. That is a generational thing because I have worked with other students without blindness and low vision who are doing the same thing. And I'm like, do you know what I'm thinking about when you are walking around your house, putting your cell phone up and down quickly or turning it around? Do you know what I'm thinking? I don't want to work with you. That's what I'm thinking because
Yeah.
I
You're
think
not
you're
presenting
unprofessional.
yourself professionally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so impressions, you only get one opportunity. And it's so real. You do only get one opportunity. And as Elizabeth said, if you're walking in with a white cane or a guide dog, someone's already going to have a perception about you, right or
Mm-hmm.
wrong. It's up to you then to overcome that perception and show them who you actually are. In our last podcast, we talked about defining yourself, and it's so true. You have to be able to do that, but you have to have the professionalism to be able to do that. And so, again, you only get one chance, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you stuff it up at the first go without doing what's required to be able to understand how you look, if you're framed right, you know, sometimes I'll see people and they'll be really close to the screen because they need to see something. They'll leave their camera on, and so all you see is up their nose or in their mouth or their eyes or whatever it is, and it's unsettling for people, right? And so they're
Yeah.
not used to that. If other people who could see wouldn't do that, you would hope at least it has happened for sure. But that's who you're competing against, right? Don't just go in thinking about you. think about the person who you're interacting with and how you want to be seen and how your body language needs to be to make the right impression. And that's everybody, right? It's not just for people with blindness and low vision. It is everybody thinks about those things. And so if
Mhm.
you're not thinking about those things, you're going to have a huge disadvantage.
Yeah, it's interesting that this is kind of one of our topics for today. My principal actually asked my fifth and sixth grade class today, hey, when you are making an impression, like what is the one thing that you want people to see in you? And I think that that's a really thought-provoking question, right? Some people in my class said, I don't care, right? And I'm like, really? You want them to see you as standoffish? Because, like, that's what you're presenting to me right now, right? Do you want them to see you as kind? Do you want them to see you as confident? Do you want them to see you as intelligent, right? Like, what do you want to present to the world? Identify a couple of those things and then have like an honest conversation with yourself and with some people that you trust. Like, where are you lacking in those skills, right? Because to me, if somebody is bouncing around on Zoom, right, that's not very competent, right? Just turn off your
Yeah.
camera.
Yeah.
Put a nice professional headshot of yourself in your Zoom
Yeah.
account and use your camera just off, right? We live in the world where people are like, "Oh, my Wi-Fi is spotty. I can't turn on my video." I don't know if that's true, but if you tell me it's true, I'm probably going to believe it, right?
Yeah. And you want to explain that as well. You don't just want to have your camera off, especially if they've got their camera on, because that's
Yep.
also not good protocol. So you have to really understand the dynamics of what you're doing in those meetings and
Yes.
any interaction, really. Well, Elizabeth, you asked a good question and a good topic there. What's the one thing that you want people to see about you?
It's a really hard question. I think kind of like the question, what is your favorite book? I think my answer could change depending on the day.
And the person
Um,
who you're interacting with.
I'm going to say right now, this is so hard. And I'm sorry, I'm going to play the gender card because if you say like any level of like confident or bold, right? There's other words for women that people put in place of confident and bold. Um, I would like someone to see me, I think, as competent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably very largely influenced by the conversations that we've been having, right?
Yeah.
Um, Maybe emotionally intelligent would also be like a top contender, right? I don't want someone to be like, oh, she's got no level of awareness, right, about
Yeah.
what's going on in her world. So I'm gonna go with emotionally intelligent. That's my choice.
I'm going to go for passionate because many people have told me that they want to work with me because I'm passionate about what I do. And
Yeah.
it comes out in how I speak, it comes out in my body language. I care about what I'm talking about. And that's really important for people to know and understand. Because if you want to work with someone who doesn't have passion for what they do, you're probably going to have a crappy result. But if people see your passion and see your drive, and we just talked about tennis before, I'll give another example. On Thursday night last week, I went to Seattle and I did a presentation at University of Washington. Their engineering class did capstone projects, and we were one of the companies selected for the capstone project.
Hmm.
And we are building a blind NFL football with haptics and beeping and recharging. And so it's all engineering type based stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
it was an open student night. So there was 100 students that would go around the tables and talk to the project coordinators about their project. And on a number of occasions, students who often can be kind of standoffish in
Mm-hmm.
today's society and a little bit interior, commented, "Wow, you're really passionate about this project."
Mm-hmm.
And I am. It's going to revolutionize the blind sports space, I think. And
That's because you're just really passionate about your fantasy football teams. Let's be honest.
well, yeah, my fantasy
Yeah.
football this year is not so good. I have
Yeah,
had
mine either.
a lot of injuries, but that's here nor there. But it's true, like you have to show that. You have to show that in everything you do. And if you're not passionate about something, you need to be talking intelligently to it. You need to do your research. And again, the body language isn't just the physical, it's the emotional, it's the mental as well. Because if you can't articulate what you'd like to say, or you can't speak intelligently to what your points need to be, then people will see that as well. And it's interesting, we grew up in an environment where I used to do either team meetings every day,
Mhm.
or I used to do in person to person meetings every day. And that's gone away now in
Yep.
my own business, where it's all Zoom, very rarely in person. And
Hmm.
I struggle to articulate as well as I used to. And I was telling Tammy, my wife, I said, I feel like I can't articulate as well as I used to. And she's like, well, you don't do it as much anymore. And it's
Exactly.
that it's that understanding that, hey, that's probably true actually. So I've been trying to bring that back, because it's something that I do miss about myself, that used to make a good impression, and hasn't been that way. So yeah, articulation is really important as well,
Hmm.
and talking intelligently to what you know. So again, doing your research. One of the
Yeah.
things that we come back about jobs is that if you're applying for a job and you don't remember what was in the job description, how are you going to be able to talk to the points that need to be relevant in that meeting or that interview? So they're some of the things that I really find very important, that are quite a bit missing in today's society.
Yeah. And let's talk about the other side of that same coin, right? It's okay to not be an expert on everything.
Yes,
One of the
absolutely.
things that I've developed a skill set of in my late 20s is like politics, right? I will literally be the first person to say, I don't know enough about this topic to engage with you in meaningful conversation about it. That's my way of saying, if you continue to push me on this subject, I'm going to get mad and I'm going to respond from a place of emotion, not intellect. Enter at your own risk, right? So recognize, your areas of improvement and whether or not you care enough to improve them, because there's some that you don't have to if you don't want to, right?
Yeah.
There are some that you can just say, this isn't worth my time at this stage of my life, and that's okay.
And look, if you're researching something or you're interviewing for a job, take the time to take bullet points down and memorize them a little bit, or expand
Mm-hmm.
from, have a base to be able to work from. Maybe you don't know everything about this subject, or maybe you're going into a new industry. When I moved back to Australia in 2010, I went and interviewed in energy, because right then energy was the growing sector where I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't going to lose my job if I did a good job, and it pays well. And there's a lot of opportunity. And so I didn't know anything about energy, but I researched it, right? So I had some talking points when I went and interviewed, and I got the first job I interviewed for, and then built a really good career for 6 years around that. But you
Mm-hmm.
have to take advantage of your opportunities. And even if you're not super passionate or super knowledgeable about something, you need to be able to do some base level of research so you can talk intuitively and have a conversation, rather than have that back and forth awkward interview where you're just answering questions and they're just asking questions, because that's not
Mm-hmm.
going
I would also offer a helpful part of that equation could be find a way that you can accessibly access and navigate notes, right? If you're a Braille reader, in particular, this is a great way for you to flex that skill and use it to your advantage. Um, you
to
know,
audio too, right? And so
to a certain extent, but like if you also show up to a meeting or an interview and you've got an earbud in,
right,
it doesn't
yeah,
always look the most professional. So just like know your skill set, right? Don't be afraid to have a little notes document or something like that if that helps you be more confident.
yeah,
Is kind of the piece that I would toss out on that.
yeah, for sure.
Yes. Okay,
So
Murray,
yeah,
let's do one more quick clip because I think this
okay,
could be fun before we do our resource share.
yeah,
Um, Body language things that you have to be aware of, like what you're doing and what it's communicating to the world. So I'm going to give you an example, and then I want us to each do like three, but I want us to take turns. Okay. So, number one for me is I cannot see well enough to understand facial expressions. Okay. So, I have a straight face and I have a giant smile. Like, those are the only two, like if you tell me to give you like a little smile, could not do it to save my life. My mom told me that my ID picture looks like I'm a serial killer. Um, so like I have been told many a time, like, you have resting blank face, right? And I'm like, thank you so much for your input. There is literally nothing I can do to fix it. Like, I don't know what to tell you. So when people are like, you should smile more, I'm like, you should go away. But sometimes you have to do things to try and make yourself more approachable. That is for me where a lot of the laugh at your own mistakes comes into play because I try things and they just don't work. So facial expressions, RBF, massive one for me. The like, just know the aura you're putting out into the world. What's your first one?
Um, a little bit similar to you,
Mhm.
expressions. I often close my eyes or don't open them wide, and so
Mm,
they're quite narrow. And so I have to make sure that I am one, looking at the person, and then two, really focusing on actually opening my eyes to be
mm.
able to have people see my eyes, because glare is an issue for me quite a lot.
Hmm.
So yeah, and I have a little bit of a lazy. I'm on the opposite side here. Um, Left eye, a little bit of a lazy left eye, which I also have to
Interesting.
be conscious of as well. So, yeah,
Yeah.
for me, it's definitely the eyes part. I have to make sure they're open and I'm looking at someone and engaging. But similar to you with the expression stuff,
Hmm.
one thing that I love about working with you is that while you might not have that expression, your voice is very expressive and you can
Yes, it
tell,
is.
like, and it's probably because of your acting training
Yeah.
with voice projection stuff, but you have very good inflection in your voice and you can tell how you're feeling based off how your voice sounds.
This is another part of my like emotional intelligence or lack thereof. I don't really hide my emotions very well. And frankly, I don't really try to, right? I mean, I think it's exhausting for me as a person to try and like cover up what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
So, Murray's absolutely right. You can 1,000% tell how my day is going and how I'm feeling about it based on the sound of my voice.
Yeah.
Okay, number two. This goes to your bit on projection, right? I am 5'8". I've been this tall since I was in the eighth grade, and I got tall. I'm not going to say before everyone else in my grade, but like 5'8's pretty tall for a girl, to be very
Yeah.
honest, right?
Absolutely.
Um, Throw my blindness on top of that, and I've always been a little bit self-conscious about my height. Throw on the fact that I dated at least one guy that was 5'4". LOL, what was I thinking? Um, I am very self conscious about my height, so I tend to slouch. Okay. And slouching looks lazy. It's not good for your back. And it really kills your level of projection skill, right? Like when you pull your shoulders back and you stand up straight, like you can feel it in your chest that you have a lot more there to work with. So be cognizant of what slouching presents to the world. A lot of people who have residual vision and use like their computers tend to hunch over to use their computers because they are relying on that residual vision. I lovingly and respectfully call that the high partial hunch. That can do very bad things for your back. So be cognizant of what you need to do to change that. Um, if you want to, again, this is all a personal choice, but that is something that I am always aware of is like, man, I'm so tall. And I just don't know how I feel about it sometimes. Okay, number two, Marie, go ahead.
Well, I'm 6 feet tall, and so I slouch a bit too, especially with my vision. If I'm sitting at a desk looking at a computer, I definitely have to look at my posture. And it's been good actually to be able to do a lot more Zoom meetings in that aspect where I'm seeing myself, and I can kind of make out most of what I'm doing. And so I adjust or try to adjust. And so right now I'm sitting in the back of my chair with my shoulders forward, kind of a little bit forward, but mostly back against the chair. And,
Mhm.
I can see if I'm slouching. So if I'm leaning in, then I'm slouching. So I'm sitting back. So I think, like, again, the self awareness part, there's a lot of blindisms, and it's really easy to have a blindism that you're not aware of. And we worked with a student recently in a workshop who has a blindism from rocking a lot, but when she sang, no blindism. And so it was really interesting to me that that mechanism in her brain switched off when she did something that she was really focused and passionate about.
Hmm. Mhm.
And I'm really actually very keen maybe to do a study about that because I think you hear it a lot with people who stutter quite significantly and then sing and they don't stutter while they sing. And so
Yep.
that's, one aspect of that. But it's very interesting to me how, someone might be rocking. That's pretty common if you have no sight that you rock a lot. I know a lot of people who do that. And it's a motion thing, right? It's to feel something rather than just sitting there without your main sense working. So I
Mhm.
get it, but you have to be self-aware about those things as well.
Um, Noah, the character from The Notebook, Ryan Gosling's character from The Notebook, he has a stutter when he's young, and his dad gets him to beat the habit by having him read him poetry.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of, whether it's fiction or reality,
Yeah,
there's a lot of that focus, right? If you're honed in on a task, it does help you break that habit a little bit.
absolutely.
Okay, number three. Um, I I I joke that I'm a cold-blooded person, which would make me less cold. So I need to like look up the science behind this. I frequently have my arms crossed, right? Because I'm cold. And that just makes me look really mad at the world or like closed off, right? It's the same thing like when women like cross their legs or when guys cross their legs. So for me, it's figuring out an alternative way to sit that maybe shows someone that I am or am not open to conversation, right? Every single one of these goes the reverse way. If I don't want to talk to somebody, I'm going to cross my arms and I'm going to look down, right? Like that's how I sit a lot of the time in airports because I'm like, leave me alone, nobody talk to me. So like knowing what you're projecting, again, the crossed arms, the crossed legs, it is I am closed off to conversation, right? And totally just the tip of the iceberg for me. There's so much more, but I'll toss it back to you for your third one before I close us out with a thought and kick us over to our resource share if you're ready.
Uh, I think I think conversational body language is really an interesting one, and I've had to work hard at this. When I was in high school, I wasn't always really confident, and I started doing debating. And when
Mm-hmm.
I joined the debate team, I've always kind of prided myself on being reasonably intelligent, and understanding things and doing research and so forth. But
Mm-hmm.
confidence in public speaking was a not so good thing for me. Debating really helped me a lot because it not only talked to me about researching and knowing what you want to talk about and having your points organized, discussion points organized, but how you frame yourself to an audience or how you frame yourself to another person.
Mm-hmm.
And across business, across my personal life, across friendships, that has taught me really well how someone's either connecting with me or not connecting with me,
Yep.
and vice versa, how I'm projecting myself or not projecting myself to someone. And so
Mm-hmm.
similar to what you're saying around, you being cold and your body language, that changes around everybody, who you trust and who you feel comfortable with. And it's something that you have to think about all the time. It's something I have to think about all the time. If I'm not engaging, is my eyes rolling, or, am I like looking around, or am I
Yep.
distracted? So I think, again, when we're talking about understanding your body language and how you want to project yourself to people and how you want people to see you, it's a
Mm-hmm.
constant thing, right? It's every conversation, it's every person, and understanding what are your triggers for pulling away or engaging, and it makes a big difference. I remember,
Mm-hmm.
we did a reunion of camps that we used to go on, and I remember being really intensely interested in what this person was telling me, and the person who was sitting to my right, she's like, "Well, you really engaged in that conversation," and I'm like, "Yeah, it was a really good conversation," and but I didn't realize how engaged I was. But she's like, "Well,
Mm-hmm.
both of you were really like engaged," and I was like, "Okay." So it really kind of taught me that people do watch you,
Yep.
and judge you on how engaged you are with people, and in crowds, or if we're going to job fairs, or these things where we're in a group of people. You might go to a conference, an NFB conference, or a state or a national conference. Engaging people and how your body language is, and how you're talking and structuring yourself, they're all really important things that you want to make
Mm-hmm.
sure you're continually working on.
I clearly did something at an NFB conference that made you want to approach me, and the rest is history. So
Well, you just love my accent too much and started bringing me out and parading me around. Say
that
this,
is
say
actively
that,
true.
say
That
this, say
is,
that. I felt like your puppet.
I mean, like you are. Sorry. Noise. Okay.
I
So
always, well, just before we move on, I just like to
yes,
say that I always remember how to spell your last name because you're like Rouse, same as house with an R. I'm like, that's so super easy. I'm like, I love that.
it's the easiest way. My mom is like Rous as in Sam E, and I'm like, no, they can spell house. They're fine.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it.
Absolutely.
I,
Absolutely.
Australia, Melbourne, the city, is my last name with an M at the front, which is Murray, and an E on the end. So I'm
Mhm.
like Melbourne without the me.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. There you go. I love it.
yeah.
I love it. Awesome. Well, of course, this is just the beginning of a conversation on body language, right? I would also offer that anyone who is interested in learning more, right, go to ChatGPT, go find an article on the internet, like whatever you want to do. A lot of the rules that apply to anyone also apply to us, right? You can learn a lot about the way that you're projecting yourself into the world just based on like your tendencies. So don't be afraid to start digging in and doing that research. So, resource archive of the day, Murray. I'm going to let you start this time out of the generosity of my heart.
Your heart is big.
I'm the Grinch. It's going to grow 3 sizes.
Only over Christmas, hopefully, or when you see it, which is usually the way. Um, my resource goes back to when I was 15 years old and
When dinosaurs roamed the earth.
into Nilly, uh, and into how people started to see me and how I wanted to project myself. And I went and purchased the book on body language by Alan Pease.
Mm.
And it's pretty fascinating. It's kind of outdated now, but at the beginning of that book, it had a personality quiz,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm sure you could look up on something like ChatGPT and take the personality quiz. And I want to see what personality types we have listening to our podcast.
Mm.
I think it's about a 50-question quiz, but it's actually pretty fascinating. So go get Alan P's body language book and take that quiz and let me know what personality type you are.
And tell us if you see any pterodactyls along the way.
Yeah, I don't know that we had pterodactyls, but if you see a croc or a dingo, make sure it doesn't eat your baby.
No, that was a comment about you being old, not about you being Australian.
Oh,
Okay. So I'm gonna kind of beg, borrow, and steal here. My chapter is actually putting together a blindness resource list or archive, if you will. And I think part of self-awareness is knowing what we need to take care of ourselves, okay? Like physically, mentally, emotionally, etc. So I had a chapter member exhibit this thing called script talk. And script talk is actually something that you can communicate with your pharmacy about adding to your medications. It's an app. To the best of my knowledge, I'm still learning and digging around. So if somebody knows more about script talk than me, please feel free to help educate Murray and myself in the comments. But it's a way to like scan a medication. So it's like a sticker that's actually put on your medication bottle or a label that's put on your bottle, and you can scan it and it will say, like, hey, this is whatever medication at this specific dosage per pill. Here's the recommended, like, you take it this many times per day and at these times. And it was just this incredibly cool experience because I've just either always put braille labels on my meds or like learned to recognize the bottles, right? So I thought that was a really cool way to be self-aware about your own care. And also, frankly, a lesson in advocacy, to shout out our last episode about, communicating with a provider for a service. And if you want to go back to your point of education, we're happy to help you take on the responsibility of getting an accessible prescriptions bill conversation started in your state legislature. So that's my resource of the day. And Murray, I will toss it over you because you are much better at the intro outros than I am without practice. So we'll work on that offline.
absolutely. I just think that's really important. And there's been a lot of work done on the Prescription Accessibility Act, which I'm excited about, and some really good apps. I know that CVS pharmacies, I believe, were one of the key starting points of that. And now other pharmacies have also caught on to that. So, absolutely, there's a lot of things out there about accessible prescriptions, and that is important that you take the right dosage.
Yes. Well, some people haven't, and that's a very scary reality, right? Especially if your pharmacy is doing something like, let's say, you take 50 milligrams of a med, right? And they give you a 25 milligram pill in one
Yeah,
in one set of bottles. So you take two a day, but the next time they change you to a 50 milligram pill, I mean, you're double dosing, right? That
yeah,
is scary. Depending on what that medicine is, that is scary and it is dangerous.
yeah,
So
absolutely, 100%.
be
No, preventable.
cognizant of your responsibility and taking on your own self-care.
Definitely, that is a good public message.
Yes.
So we are done. Thank you for listening, and we want your feedback as always. So leave your comments about your own body language. Tell me if you did the quiz about Alan P's body language book. Love to hear that, and anything that stood out to you, or ideas or things that have worked for you for our community as well. We are available on iTunes. I was only going to say YouTunes, which is a cross between YouTube and iTunes. We're available on both, and Spotify as well. So download a podcast, search Ability, Changing the Narrative, and we will come back with future episodes. We also want to hear about topics that you have for future episodes as well.
Sounds good. Thanks all for tuning in. We'll catch you guys on the next episode of Changing the Narrative.
Bye.
Bye.